everybody. How are you? We're back again, and we're going to do another chapter. We start a new chapter this time. In our book. Yeah, we do. Yeah, we do. The Window of Contentment. Simeon. Years ago, I heard Dallas Seminary professor Howard Hendricks say that Christmas in America is not so much about giving as it is about swapping. If we give someone a fabulous gift, the gift we receive from them is, well, less than fabulous. That's okay. We'll make sure that things get evened out the next year when it comes time to select their gift. Who hasn't sometimes felt just a little slighted at the inadequacy of a gift received? Come on, be honest now. In fact, our culture feeds that disappointment by pointing our attention to the gifts that are impossible for the average person to afford. Still, we wake up on Christmas morning, certain that someone whose love for us will be measured by the quality of his or her gift to us is going to hit it out of the park this year. How can anything but the weeds of discontent grow in that kind of emotional playing field? For me, this drags my memory back to when I was 12 years old. I asked for a guitar for Christmas. My request seemed perfectly reasonable. After all, how could I become the next Paul McCartney or George Harrison if I didn't start playing? I lay awake all Christmas Eve, imagining the feel of the strings on my finger and the effortless chords that would flow from that instrument. Never mind the fact that I didn't know how to play. Finally, Christmas morning arrived. I waited anxiously until Dad gave the signal for the kids to descend on the Christmas tree like a plague of locusts. Then I dashed down the stairs to the living room and looked all over for my guitar, but it wasn't there. And to make matters worse, I found in its place the worst Christmas gift any 12-year-old boy, aspiring Beatle, ever received: a dictionary. Now, from the perspective of my alleged adulthood, it is clear that I was never going to be the 1960s equivalent of American Idol. And I acknowledge that I have spent my adult life dealing with words. Therefore, the dictionary was a gift that had much more enduring value and worth. But you could never have convinced a heartbroken 12-year-old of that fact. A day intended to be a joyful day of celebration had been darkened by the cloud of disappointment. Under that cloud, speeches regarding the need to be grateful, happy, or content only exacerbated my disappointment. That is what comes from expectations that are either unrealistic or deceived. They will never produce contentment. So this chapter is a rather challenging one for me because it reminds me of how selfish and inappropriate expectations can be, and how necessary it is, especially during the season devoted to God's gift to us, to recalibrate my own expectations. The challenge to cultivate a heart of contentment is a rough thing to grapple with, and millions of bad examples of wrong expectations and deep disappointments could be cited as warnings. Perhaps a better plan would be to see a single example of right expectations and the profound contentment they can generate. A life of devotion. As I think of the heading for this section, the names and faces of people who have lived long lives of spiritual service and faithfulness fill my memory. People whose examples have influenced my own heart and thinking about ministry. It seems that at every critical step along the way in my own spiritual journey, I have been privileged to encounter an older saint who was walking the walk and doing the work with joy and satisfaction. While I may feel underqualified to write out my own life about a life of devotion, I am pretty sure that I know a life of devotion when I see it. It has a lot to do with staying by the stuff and buckling in for the long haul and running all the way to the finish line. And all those other cliches that are made trivial because they tend to be timed with a stopwatch, when what they really require is a calendar. A life of devotion demands more. It demands everything. This next perspective on the Christmas story involves just such a man. Now, in his advancing years, Simeon had been a fixture at the temple in Jerusalem for longer than anyone can remember. But he keeps showing up, honoring his God, waiting for the promise. His devotion is captured by Luke with only a few words, but each one is packed with insight. Luke chapter 2, verse 25. And there was a man in Jerusalem whose name was Simeon. And this man was righteous and devout, looking for the consolation of Israel. And the Holy Spirit was upon him. This man Simeon, he had a track record instead of a reputation. Notice how he is described. He is described as righteous. In the broad sense, righteous refers to a person who is upright, virtuous, keeping the commands of God. It speaks of someone who is committed to living a life on God's terms instead of his or her own. In a narrower sense, Strong's Concordance describes a righteous person as one who deals appropriately and fairly with others. In either case, it is certainly a noble title that is worthy of our aspirations. He was described as devout. This word speaks of a person who reveres God and allows that reverence to impact his life and his choices. Whereas righteous has to do with obeying God, one who is devout is consumed with honoring God, a significant commitment indeed. He was described as looking for the consolation of Israel. The consolation of Israel is a reference to the Messiah of Israel. Simeon was living his life based on this anticipation, looking for the Messiah. While many, especially senior citizens, appear to be consumed with the past, Simeon was fixed on the future. He was described as the Holy Spirit was upon him. Now this is fascinating because until the Holy Spirit came to indwell believers at Pentecost, as in Acts chapter 2, the Holy Spirit's role was largely in the background. The attachment of the Spirit of God to an individual in the way is a New Testament phenomenon being experienced by a man who was living prior to the cross. If someone could only use a few phrases to describe you, what would they be? My wife and I joke about the episode of the old TV show WKRP in Cincinnati, where the radio station's sales manager, the terminally cheesy and slimy Herb Tarlick, is being profiled on a local television program. He has pounded into everyone how he wants to be represented. And it comically becomes a relentless mantra of untrue characterizations that he himself has scripted for all his colleagues and family members to repeat over and over. Hardworking, family man, all around good guy. That was how he wanted to be perceived. It just wasn't how he wanted to live. I prefer Luke's list. The description he gave Simeon did not have to be fabricated. It was not a caricature. It was an accurate description of a faithful man who lived a life of devotion. I think we're going to stop right there and we'll pick up with the thrill of hope tomorrow. Yeah. We all love a good thrill, don't we? I know I do. Y'all, as we get older, I know a lot of y'all, we've attended a lot of funeral services for people who have passed on. And it always fascinates me when we hear words given about them upon their passing. And it also makes us contemplate as to what words will be said about us upon passing. All too often, we don't think about these things until we get close to that timeline. But in reality, we should be thinking about that and impressing that upon our children. The importance of not how we're described or what attributes we're given, but as to a true description of how we've lived our life all the way through. And now some of you will say, well, for some of us it would maybe not be a good picture. Oh no. See, that's not the way it works. Because even in our shortcomings, and we've all got them, there's good traits to be found. And sometimes when we can magnify those good traits, it's amazing how the picture will change. Because just as when you ride a motorcycle, wherever you're looking, that's where you're going to end up. I don't know. Something to think about. Something to ponder. It's a wonder. Have a great weekend, y'all.